This is a very interesting subject, and I work in sales, or worked in sales for a very long time. And I must say, again, working in sales, you realize very quickly how people see you, not just in your ability to sell or ability, but also the ability to stay positive uh, in how you see things. Only because it really tells a lot about a person, that someone that talks positive is also someone that thinks positive and looks at life in a way that has a future and has hope. And we certainly need this today more than ever. And so this is a perfect subject to talk about when it comes to also trying to improve or better yourselves in this situation that we are, which is very difficult and very tough to go from one day to the next. And we hear all kinds of things, and we don't know what the future holds, and so this is a pretty good strong subject to talk about today. Okay, so positive talking is certainly the next level of positive thinking. Okay, so positive talking is simple, right? Think your positive thought, need to say it out loud for sure, and eventually speaking your positive thoughts out loud becomes second nature. And this is really a lesson that you could learn in trying to do when you're talking, is always to say something in the positive talk or positive way. So by speaking your aspirations, goals, and dreams aloud, you're holding yourself accountable for finding a way to make them a reality. So even if you say them to yourself aloud, if you're home, alone in the home, and especially a lot of people are alone in homes today, and to stay positive is very difficult when you're alone for days and days. So I think we just surpassed 2 months of home isolation. I know my isolation started around the 13th, so that was yesterday. So that is over 2 months actually of isolation, which is makes it difficult. And when it comes to staying positive and waking up every day, and like I think I mentioned last time, if you have a chance to watch that movie, Groundhog Day, where one gentleman repeats the same day over and over and over again. This is basically how a lot of people are seeing life right now. Is it's repetitive, and it's a Groundhog Day. So if you have to repeat, you might as well repeat things in a positive manner and stay positive for the future, because the future is there. It's just a matter of matter of time. The future will be there, and we'll certainly get through this somehow. And even if it takes years, we'll get there for sure. So positive language improves. Let's stick to business, right? So positive language to improve business communications. It creates a positive image of you, let's say, and your company if you work for somebody, or your own company. One way of doing it is always to smile when you speak. And this is something that if you ever listen to someone talk on the phone where you don't even see them, you can tell if that person is in a good mood, bad mood, or if they're smiling or if they're not. It's very obvious, right? So smile when you speak. People will react differently when you put a little smile on your own face. Human nature mirrors the person we are speaking to, that's for sure. Focus on what you can do, stay positive. Instead of "we can't do that until next week," you should say "we will be able to do that next week." So right there in that sentence tells you all about positive language, right? You need to find a way to reverse and get rid of the negatives. And as much as possible, you need to eliminate all the negatives when you talk, which is very difficult to do, because we're used to using negatives. And if you teach, or if you learn languages like English or any language, you're going to see that there's always the negative language, or the negative, versus a positive. It's always going to be there. How to use the negative approach, right? I cannot do this, right? I can do this. So you can't, there it is. You can't avoid the negative language. What an example right there. You can't. It's there always for you. So the goal in positive language in this exercise or in this lecture here is to do your best to try to lessen the amount of times you actually use negative language, right? So suggest alternatives and solutions instead of saying that is okay, accept that. So you can say if you do this, it will be perfect. X meaning doing something. So again, using a different language, a different way, certainly leads to taking responsibility, right? Don't lay blame on others. Instead of it's not my fault, say here's what I can do to fix that. And I think having children, I'm quite sure most of you have children, not all of you, but I'm sure there are, most of you have children, and I do too. This is a very difficult exercise to do, to accept responsibility. Growing up, my parents used to tell me the opposite, right? And coming from their mindset, being immigrants from Italy and from Europe, right? Their mindset was the parents, because they were told that all the time, is that parents are always right, right? So I heard that for the longest of time that the parents should always be right, but I realized that's really not true, right? Parents are not always right, and I think the best lesson you can give your child is to take responsibility on an action that you did instead of blaming others. So this is really a good lesson, I think, for young couples with children, is not to always lay blame on them, but to accept blame, to teach them a lesson that taking responsibility is positive and it's not negative. Okay, so avoid sounding pushy. Instead of you'll have to, you can say could you, or would you be able to, or what our need is. So the language changes here and it becomes a little bit more, open to discussion instead of having to be just one direction or one way. Use a yes, we can attitude instead of no, because say yes as soon as. And I'll show you some words now, and I get this all the time when I do role play in sales, is that if a customer objects to something, we're going to hear certain words, which I'm going to show you in a couple of seconds, or a couple of minutes, or a couple of slides, I should say, that gives you an understanding of how we need to get rid of certain words or phrases that come to mind all the time. So positive communication certainly has the power to convey messages, even negative ones, but in a constructive manner. It does set the tone in conversation and shows somehow that you do care, okay? And caring in business, let me tell you, is more important than trying to convince or trying to persuade somebody, okay? I'll give you some examples of words that are cringing, words that you should avoid and could sound negative. They're not necessarily negative words, right? Like. If you say a lot of likes, that is really not a negative word. But repeating it all the time becomes a negative phrase, and only because you can tell that there is no other way, and there's no other words that you could use instead, and you're stuck in saying like. And a lot of times when you say this, it becomes very negative, and also people don't listen to that, or they think something is wrong if you always say that. Another sentence that is very also when we talk about negative or in many ways, believe it or not, saying thanks a lot is considered to be a negative phrase. It's also informal, and informality in English is negative, period. If you use informal language in English, it's considered always to be informal. So thanks a lot, right? Saying thanks a lot is a negative phrase and also informal phrase. How's your day going? Right? Very informal, and again, for it to be informal makes it negative. So as you can see, right, it's not just negative words. And in French, maybe a little bit of French, this could also be considered to be negative, believe it or not. Ça va bien. very short and sweet, but also very informal. If you use the word so in front of sentences or when you talk, so let me tell you this. So and you hear this again a lot from politicians or actors or certain people that are in the everyday lives that we lead. Using the word so is also considered to be a negative term and should not be used. Okay, so let's continue. Believe it or not, have a nice day. Why would have a nice day be considered to be, why would I put that up there right now? Why is this negative? Anybody want to, what's your opinion? Why would I put have a nice day to be a phrase that could be considered to be negative? I mean, I'm wishing you a nice day, right? So it should not be negative. No one? No idea. Okay. So have a nice day is you're basically, this is in many ways it's considered to be imperative language. Imperative language is a language that you order, right? And here basically what you're saying is that you're ordering somebody to have a nice day, right? So this is why have a nice day, said it this way, in actual fact in business, right? You avoid this sentence, and especially this one too, right? Or these two. How's your day going? How are you? In business, believe it or not, this is too informal and it's too negative, right? Or if you hear talkers or orators or lecturers or anybody, politicians, using this. If anybody says, etc., 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 that, this is the way I see it, you know what I mean, la, 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 you know, stuff like that, repetitive, just to avoid to talk. So anybody that avoids to talk and say something clear and concise in positive language or in business language is considered to be negative. So using etc., etc., as I said, la la la, you know, as I said, you know, all this kind of language to avoid to talk, to avoid to say something is considered to be negative. Okay? Honestly, such a nice word, right? Honestly is such a beautiful word. But if you have to use the word honestly in English, you're basically telling whoever you're talking to that possibly what you told them before was not honest. So anybody that uses the word honestly and is saying, or may I be honest with you, right? So that means, does that mean that whatever they said before, they weren't honest, right? So think about that and you'll see exactly what I mean, is that when people use that word, of course they're using it because they don't have anything else to say. It's like saying etc., 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 right? Honestly means the same thing. Basically, unfortunately, these are all adverbs, and they're just filling in space because they don't really know what to say or how to say it, right? And here's another one that in English, believe it or not, this is used by everybody, including myself, and I have to catch myself often not to use this. And even the Prime Minister of Canada uses this quite a bit. And this is something that, as I'm saying now, you should try to avoid in the business language or in positive language, right? And you have to catch yourself, like I'm catching myself now, not to say the And if you listen to even politicians, like I said, Prime Minister Trudeau will quite a bit. And it doesn't sound correct. It doesn't sound positive, right? You could also have language that is deflective. And the language that is deflective, or you're hiding behind something in business, you cannot use this type of language. What I'm talking about is passive aggressive language, right? And if you see someone that looks mad, acts mad, and you ask him, why are you mad? And he says, I'm not mad, right? So this type of language is considered to be passive aggressive, and this also destroys business. Whatever, right? If someone says that to you in business, or again, so, just wondering. And here's a real monster one that you hear often in offices, and that really hurts, and people listen to these things. When someone says to you, I was only joking, the odds are they were joking, right? So when everybody says that to you, I was only joking, I'm just kidding around. No, you're not kidding around. You're trying to hurt me. This is considered to be passive aggressive. Some more sentences. Hope it's worth it. What are your thoughts, right? Said this way is also a negative passive aggressive expression, right? These are all negative language that you should avoid, again, in business, right? Then we're talking about business here, and you should not use it. All right, so let me give you some tips, and this is the biggest one. I think my students that have been with me for a while in professional sales will recognize what I'm going to say next, and what you should not do in any way, shape, or form, and that is to say that you're sorry, right? And if you do, you have to limit the apologies that you do this. So the more you say you're sorry, the more people, to the same person over and over again, let's say you're late all the time, or you forgot to do something, or whatever the reason or the excuse that you're using, right? More people will realize that you're not sorry, and you're just saying that to say it. And believe it or not, the word sorry is close to being, I would think it is, the #1 word in movies. If you watch movies or TV shows and everything, you will hear the word sorry hundreds of times in every show that you watch, right? So think about that for a minute. What does that tell you if they're using the word sorry? Or it was badly written, or the language they're trying to use is got to be common language, and to say sorry is certainly overused in life, in movies, but should not be used in business. If you are sorry for something, or you did something wrong, just state why you were wrong, right? So when we say sorry, it taints what follows. No one will believe after what you say. Sorry, I'm late. No, you're not, right? People believe that if you're sorry, there must be something wrong, or maybe you are going to make an excuse. And most of the times, that's what that is. Just accept the responsibility, right? So instead, let's see what we have done. Have that as similar, or did you look at the new stock we just received today, right? So you have to not be sorry, and you have to go to the point and make it clear of what you're trying to say, right? So if you could say, have you been in retailing with a sales representative and says, I'm sorry, we don't carry those, or I'm sorry, all we have is what's on the shelf, or I'm sorry, we ran out, right? They're not sorry, right? They ran out. I mean, they're happy they ran out because they actually sold. So they're not being sorry. They should just be a bit more clear and say something like, let's see what we have that is similar, or did you look at the new stock we just received, instead of saying, I'm sorry, we have no more. All right, so in business, stay away from the word sorry. Another tip is to focus on what's next instead of what's past. Positive is always about what's going to happen and not reflect on what took place, right? So we always have the tendency to talk about the past and when it comes to in general, but we shouldn't. We should talk about the future. So a little communication also value in discussing what already happened or what happened in the past. It's always more difficult to talk about what we don't know, which is tomorrow, right? As it is today. It's easy to talk about what happened yesterday, and the governments should have done this, and the government should have done that, and right, that's easy. But what should the governments do tomorrow is very difficult, and that's why we should always have a conversation in business, is talk about focus on the future or today. And so most listeners tune out because there is nothing they can do to change the past. There's nothing at all. It's done with. Let's see what we can do in the future. So emphasizing the future generates positive action and positive language. So a few more tips. Focus on what can be done instead of what can't be done. People are not as interested in what can't be done as they are in what can be done. Positive thinking, which leads to positive communication, is what can be done instead of what can't be done, right? So be more realistic in talking in business, makes it a little bit more focused on what can be done. These are very simple tips, but this is positive language. Always ask instead of tell. Asking has a more positive tone, right? Instead of giving your opinion, right? Always giving your opinion. If I were you, I would do this. I'm not sure if I'm quite sure quite a few of you they know someone in your lives that always is very opinionated and will give their opinions and give you direction in your lives, right? You should do this, right? Don't do that. Why are you doing that? If I had to listen to all the people in my life that gave me all those, when I stopped working in sales and went to teaching, and I quit a nice job. It was a great job, lucrative career and everything. And all the people that surrounded me in general would say, why'd you do that? Why'd you quit that? You're going to do what? You're going back to school? Are you crazy? At your age, you're going back to school, right? So all that kind of language tells you that, are these really your friends? Are these people that are the type of people that you want to be with? Or maybe you should distance yourself from them, and because they're not as positive or don't see life as positive as you do, right? So again, ask instead of telling when giving instructions and directions. You should ask, and most rather be asked than told. I don't think many people like to be told to do things, right? So we prefer to have a conversation and not make it one directional, and that I know everything and you know nothing. Let me tell you what to do, right? That's not considered to be positive language, especially in business and especially in sales. All right, we're almost done. So provide options or choices, right? Don't always give one choice. If you have to give some choices, we'll focus the thinking on what we can do instead of what we can't do, right? So this is always to provide options or choices in business. And also use specific words to provide clear, positive direction. Now we're getting back into the language of active language and formal language, right? Vague words choice leads to take no action at all. This is why we connect both positive language and also active. So this is where it connects quite a bit. And the voice you use should always be active and not passive, to be clear. A great tip also is to use language that is inclusive. Language that is inclusive, right? It works always positively in a relationship. A relationship is not necessarily just a relationship, let's say with your wife or husband or children, but also in business, right? If you have a sales meeting, it's not about how much you sold in sales, it's how much the company sold or how much the sales force sold, right? So that's why I like to avoid giving. They do this when I was in sales. They used to give this. They used to give an award always to the number one salesperson, and they would give them a little trophy and stuff like that, or a free supper or something like that. And I found that was was not inclusive. I don't think it was the right way of doing sales, especially if you have a sales team. Why all of a sudden do you have to have one that stands out? So I'm very socialistic, as you can see by what I'm trying to say, is that a sales team should be a team all the time. Everybody should be rewarded as a team and not as an individual. So avoid statements as you'll have to, you should have, you'll never, right? There's a negative word. So this is the core of a bargaining or negotiating approach to get positive results all the time is always to be inclusive. It's the power of positive communication is always to include, not exclude. Okay, so far so good. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I will repeat, or I will have this video for you, and or the link I should say, so you can go back and take a look at what is said. Talking about active versus negative or passive, right? Develop a positive vocabulary to support positive communication. Vocabulary has more negative words than positive words, right? So here's a few words to avoid, and I'm not going to read through them. I'll just go through a few of them, right? So words to avoid, right? One that stands out: reject, never, neglect, can't, won't, couldn't, shouldn't, all negative words. Unable, complain, impossible, probably the worst word to avoid is to say something in sales or in business that it's impossible. Can you deliver this tomorrow? Impossible, right? So you have to be able to, in sales, deflect this and certainly not use the word impossible. I can't do that, right? Can you lower the price? No, I can't do that, right? That's very negative. Words to emphasize. Some are very obvious words that you should emphasize, right? Good, better, progress, excellent, can do, improve, approach. All these are words that should be used in positive language, not the ones to avoid. Okay. Here's a good exercise for you, is choose certain negative words and make every effort to eliminate them from your vocabulary for a week or so, right? So then choose a few more words and work on those, and soon you will be able to hear your own voice, the power of positive communication in your vocabulary. And let me tell you, this works. So what I'm trying to say here is a good exercise is that listen to what words you're saying when you're talking, and if there's words that you repeat often enough to your children, to your husband, to your friends, to the store, or in general in your everyday vocabulary, right? Write them down, make a little note. I always say never, okay? Or I always say honestly, or I always say unfortunately, or basically. Actually is one word that I tend to use a lot. So I tend to use a lot actually and basically. So I work very hard in eliminating these words. Every time I hear them, I cringe. I go, oh, I just said basically. I shouldn't have said that, right? And try to avoid it the next time. Or, right? If I say all the time, write it down and catch yourself and make it a point to catch yourself next time you say it and not say it. Pause. I'm about to say that word. I don't want to say it, and you don't say it. It works, all right? But it takes a big effort to be able to switch to a positive communicator, right? It really does. It's not an easy thing to do. I will give you also, just to finish on a positive note, I will give you exercises for both, there's the I will give you exercises for both the, there's the again, right? See the way you catch yourself? I catch it, I know it's there, I have to eliminate it. I'll give you exercises for the passive and active voice, and I'll give you the exercise also for positive language, and I'll give you the two links I'll give you two links for both exercises or both lectures, so you'll have them. And you can take a look at them, and certainly if you have any questions, you could let me know, and you can work on those for sure. Is there any questions on, I know I spoke a lot, right? But it's a short period of time. I think I need to share a lot of information with you. I think I did. Maybe a little bit too much. I don't know. Is it okay? Did it went okay? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.